Greetings, friends. You're on the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we'll discuss the situation in Ukraine as of August 23rd, 2025. A large number of very interesting events took place today, so let's get started. Well, let's now return to the front line. Over the past 24 hours, a lot of noteworthy information has been published. We'll begin with the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the armed forces of the Russian Federation, specifically units of the Vostok grouping, continue their advance toward the settlements of Pokrovsk and Hulyapol, more precisely, toward the R85 highway that connects these two settlements. A large number of geolocations are coming from this area. Today, pro-Ukrainian cartographers from the Deep State team published new map updates, according to which Russian forces have already managed to come very close to, and possibly even enter, the settlement of Kamyshevaha. Heavy fighting is ongoing here, with the Russian army advancing. Overall, the intention of the Russian command is clear not only to us, but also to the Ukrainian command. The movement is going westward, toward the R85 highway, in order to effectively cut off Hulyapol from supplies, place it into a semi-encirclement, and possibly even create several smaller pockets in the area of Uspanivka and Nova Mykolaievka. This section sees a massive number of daily strikes with tube and rocket artillery, as well as heavy use of aviation striking Ukrainian armed forces positions. At first glance, everything seems to be going according to some plan devised in the Russian command headquarters. However, for several days now, conflicting reports have been emerging from the western part of the Donetsk region. These are the very settlements where the Vostok grouping launched a major offensive in July, toward places like Tolstoy, Zeleny High, as well as Andriivka and Klevtsova. From there comes a lot of interesting yet contradictory information. Let me remind you that a few days ago, units of Ukraine's heavy mechanized brigade published a very curious video from the southern part of the Andriivka-Klevtsov settlement. We have repeatedly paid attention to this video material, because in that footage we can see that from the 1st to the 14th, the settlement was under Russian army control, but already by August 16th, the Ukrainian side published new footage where two Ukrainian soldiers are raising a Ukrainian flag in the southeastern part of the village. At that time, we pointed out, and repeatedly raised the issue, that the Ukrainian side, when retreating, tends to record video footage with flags before the actual withdrawal, so that later they can dispute statements made by the Russian Ministry of Defense or by specific Russian force groupings responsible for a given sector. And we then concluded, let's update the map, but keep a close eye on the direction, waiting for new information that could clarify the situation. And already on the 17th, some neutral pro-Western cartographers updated their maps, asserting that yes, indeed, the Ukrainian side carried out a series of successful counterattacks. As a result, the 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reportedly managed to partially regain control over Zeleny High and fully over Andriivka-Klevtsov. Based on that report, we made the corresponding update and began monitoring the situation even more closely. And now, today, August 21st, 2025, yet another update has been made. But this time much further and deeper into territory previously marked under Russian armed forces control. This update was based on footage once again published by the 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade. The only issue is this. If you follow the dynamics of the maps, you may have noticed that earlier this morning this entire territory was shaded yellow, meaning under Ukrainian control, Andriivka-Klevtsova, Zeleny High, as well as Tolstoy village. The video in question, released by Ukraine's ground forces, the 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade, again shows several Ukrainian soldiers raising a Ukrainian flag in the central part of the settlement. It was precisely in this spot that Ukrainian soldiers were geolocated, which served as the basis for this map update. And in fact, today this triangle of territory is generating the most disputes, arguments and debates within the OSINT community, because indeed there seems to be some form of counter-offensive. If all this information is confirmed, then at the very moment when the Russian army began pushing toward the R85 highway between Pokrovsk and Hulyapol, aiming to break through defenses, reach operational space, and encircle Hulyapol, that is, carrying out quite ambitious large-scale plans. At that very same moment, the Ukrainian side is launching a counterattack from the Novopavlivka sector toward Podobna and Komar. Their goal is to regain lost territory and possibly even encircle the Russian forces advancing west. In other words, these are Ukrainian attempts not just to disrupt some tactical operation, but to derail the entire Zaporizhzhia offensive of the Russian armed forces. From all this, such a picture is starting to emerge. However, closer to the time when we began preparing this video report, some OSINT analysts, people specializing in geolocations and open-source data analysis, looked more closely at the Ukrainian footage and noticed several inconsistencies. Here's the first frame, the first seconds of the video. We see two Ukrainian soldiers raising the Ukrainian flag, and on the left, we see several satellite images available in open sources. The upper image, in the top left corner, is a satellite shot of this area taken yesterday, August 20th, 2025. The lower image was taken in early July, when the Russian army was actively advancing in this sector. And if we compare the two, we can see blackened spots north and south of Tolstoy village. These are traces of battles, burned-out fields, scorched land, possibly the result of strikes by TOS-1A, Sontsepiok thermobaric rocket systems. In other words, these are battle scars from the fighting that unfolded around Tolstoy village. And if we look at this video, we can clearly see that yes, indeed, in the footage published by the Ukrainian side, those same black scorched fields are present. Fields that were not visible in the satellite imagery taken yesterday. Here's another angle from the same video, where Ukrainian units raise the flag, and we can see burnt-out sections of land, those black patches that existed in July, but which were no longer there in August. Therefore, based on this analysis, we made another map adjustment, shading the territory back into a grey zone. We're waiting for additional information, trying to sort it out ourselves, and perhaps we will ultimately conclude that yes, indeed, the Ukrainian side once again used footage from Tolstoy village, recorded before Ukrainian troops withdrew from the settlement, in order to use it now, a month later, to stage a so-called media counterattack, portraying it as if they had almost completely regained control over the entire western part of the Donetsk region. We'll keep a very close watch on this situation, closely follow the actions of the 5th Heavy Mechanized Brigade, and continue making map updates and discussing them with you. Next, we move on to the Pokrovsk sector of the front, where fighting continues. But over the past day, once again, no map changes were recorded. The Ukrainian side, as we can see, has completely lost the initiative. Yes, in the first days of their counter-offensive, they managed to achieve some progress to stabilize the situation, perhaps cutting through strikes here and there, perhaps managing to encircle or isolate certain Russian units. So there was some success. But literally 3 to 4 days later, everything stopped. The counter-offensive ground to a halt. The Russian side, after withstanding the blows of Ukraine's elite troops of the First Corps, gradually regrouped and took the initiative back into its own hands. Now the Russian side clearly understands that no further breakthrough is possible. No breakthrough toward Dobropilya, Rodinske, Belitska, and deeper into the remaining part of the Donetsk region, until the Shakov pocket is fully cleared. And right now, that is exactly what the Russian army is doing, step by step clearing the Shakov pocket. Let me remind you that just yesterday, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced the clearing of Pankivka. Today, we can assume that fighting is already taking place in settlements such as Vladimirovka. Without a doubt, Russian forces are approaching Shakov. In fact, today there were already reports of an entry into Shakov from the west. So first comes the clearing of this Shakov pocket. Once it is cleared, the staging area for further Russian offensives will be approximately 20 kilometers wide. From this 20-kilometer wide front, the Russian army will then be able to move virtually in any direction. But the clearing of the Shakov pocket will still take some more time. Next, we move to the direction of Konstantinovka, where fighting continues. Today we once again see map updates, and, as could probably be expected, these updates concern the southeastern part of Konstantinovka. Let me remind you that in recent days, mostly pro-Russian sources and cartographers have been loudly claiming that Russian forces managed to enter the southeastern part of Konstantinovka. Yesterday, we could observe this on the maps. Today, the updates suggest that yes, Russian units may indeed have entered the southeastern part of Konstantinovka. However, possibly due to the complexity of the situation, or because the distance to more stable positions was too great, Russian units eventually withdrew. As a result, the territory in the southeastern part of Konstantinovka, all the way up to Predtekin and Stupochki, is now marked by most pro-Russian experts and cartographers as a neutral or grey zone, a kill zone where heavy fighting is ongoing and where Russian forces are attempting to fully seize the initiative and secure a permanent foothold. Well, we now wait for geolocations to confirm any new map updates. Meanwhile, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, Russian forces have completely cleared the settlement of Oleksandr Shultin. This was announced today, and it was the southern grouping of forces that carried out the operation in this sector. There is also footage from objective control confirming the presence of Russian units on the eastern outskirts. We can see Russian equipment moving there under Ukrainian drone strikes. So yes, there is evidence confirming either the entry into or the presence on the eastern side, and the Ministry of Defense has officially announced full clearing. Effectively, we can now say that the southeastern part of what could be called the Pokrovsk agglomeration, or the Pokrovsk defensive line, has collapsed. All the settlements to the southeast are under Russian control. Further south, villages such as Ivanopilia, Pleshchivka, Nelipivka, and Kliban-Bek are still partially or entirely under Ukrainian control, but everything southeast of them has already been lost. In the near future, we can expect the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian forces toward the city. For now, there are still some attempts to hold a small pocket, a network of strongpoints in the fields, but it seems unlikely that this defensive line can be held for long. Moreover, more and more footage from objective control is emerging from this direction, showing that the Ukrainian side is experiencing severe logistical problems. The entire area is under visual control of Russian forces. As soon as another crossing is built, it is immediately destroyed. In this footage, for example, we can see a small bridge constructed near the Kliban-Bek reservoir to enable evacuation and rotation of units trapped in the Kliban-Bek pocket. But as soon as this crossing was detected, it was immediately destroyed by artillery strikes. In the area of Kliban-Bek and Nelipivka itself, Russian forces are working to eliminate the network of strongpoints, forming the last Ukrainian defensive line in this sector, and effectively their supply system. Drones are active here, and the fortifications are heavily reinforced with concrete, making progress extremely difficult. It is hard to dismantle Ukrainian positions, but despite this, they are gradually being taken apart by the heavy calibers of the Russian armed forces. Everything here is clearly entering the final stage. Most likely, in the very near future, final map updates will be made. Next, we move on to the Lyman sector. Over the past 24 hours, virtually nothing new has been recorded. Russian artillery is again working in the area of Dronivka, striking crossings, Ukrainian equipment, positions, and FPV drone operators. No troop movements or territorial changes were recorded. It is positional warfare, artillery duels. The same situation is reported today in the Lyman sector. According to various pro-Russian cartographers, as well as some neutral and pro-Ukrainian ones, there is minor Russian progress in the area of Torsky. But nothing substantial enough has been published that would justify updating the maps. A similar situation is observed today in the Siversk-Kupiansk direction, as well as on the Vovchansk and Sumy sectors. So tonight we expect a massive air raid, and we will see how the situation unfolds further. And that's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and all the best to you.